Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to share with you a review of the new Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. We're going to be swatching everything. I'll give you guys my thoughts about the formula, whether or not this is worth it, and how I did my makeup today using this palette. So if you guys want to know everything about the new Natasha Denona Sunrise palette, then just keep on watching. Alright, so the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette is available at Sephora for $65. This palette has 15 shades, a full-size mirror. I love that it's like a hard case. Really nice variety, really great just packaging overall. Compared to her $129 palette, I have her gold palette. This is the only other eyeshadow palette I have from Natasha Denona. I did have the mini sunset palette. I decluttered it. I hated it. It was $25, not even worth it. But that's way smaller, so I'm glad that she came out with something else that is like in between this $129 palette. It doesn't look way smaller, so initially when I first saw the pictures of this palette, I actually thought it was going to be $129. So it took me a while to buy it because it took me forever to read about it being $65. Like I couldn't even believe it. So you can see it's not that much smaller compared to an $129 palette, but you do get about half as much product as you do get in the big palettes. So in here you get 0.67 ounces of product total for 15 shades, and then in here for $129 you get 1.2 ounces total. So here's a size comparison for reference. Definitely in the gold palette you can see like the pans are basically double the size compared to this, but this is like a normal size palette to me compared to something like this. This is huge. This will last you a decade. This will last you a normal amount of time, basically. So I actually, like, I wish I had this palette in this size. I feel like that would be a lot more convenient. And it's not gonna get as messy as something like this where you have the plastic that is weird and random, and then you can see how it just gets like super messy. I'm just a messy person. My eyeshadow palettes are always messy, but I would like it to be prevented with like sleeker packaging. So I really like the packaging overall because this is like easy to keep clean and maintain compared to something that has like that smudgy texture like this palette, which is way expensive. So really happy with the overall layout and packaging of this palette. Now let's talk about the shades. You do get 15 shades in this palette. It's a good variety too. Like you do get a good variety from like a pretty light matte to a pretty deep matte, and then everything kind of in between. So I like that there's some variety there with the mattes. You get a lot of variety with the shimmers. And in total you have 7 mattes in this palette, 5 metallic shades, and then 3 duochrome shades that are a little bit more of like a dry, flaky texture. I did find in my tutorial today that the best way to apply the duochromes is with glitter glue. It makes a world of difference. I have been trying them out outside of today with a wet brush and just packing it on, which works, but glitter glue is definitely the way to go. The duochromes in here are Aster, which is what I have in the center of my lid today, Awakening, which there should already be a video on my Instagram with this on my lid, and I did just apply it with a wet brush in that video, but I do want to try it out with glitter glue because I feel like it's definitely going to be more vibrant. And then the other duochrome is Azalea, which is right here in the center. So these are going to be just a little bit drier on their own. They look very like watered down basically compared to something like what I have on my lid today, which is the shade Poppy, which is going to be a lot more foiled and metallic right off the bat. With the duochromes, you definitely need to use at least a wet brush, if not glitter glue, for the best effect. But if you do that, it's really gonna make a big difference. All right, so that's basically the breakdown of the palette. I wanna get into the tutorial so you guys can see how I did my eye makeup today with the palette. And I'll also give you guys a lot more detail about how I feel about all of the different formulas in the palette. All right, so I'm just gonna get started and then we'll see where we end up going with some of these shades. I do wanna start off with some of the lighter tones. We're gonna start off with this shade Morning, which is like a really soft, matte, peachy shade. I'm using a Sigma E40. This is a super old brush. I actually have one that's a bit newer. but I just like really old, really crappy brushes, because to me they're not. It's like molded to my eye shape compared to the newer brush, but I need to break this one in. But anyways, I'm going in with that lighter peach shade. I like that they have like a really light transition shade, because that way I could just apply this like super quickly with one of like these shades for the lid for like a 2-second eye look, which is kind of my go-to on most days. So this isn't just like a more dramatic eye look palette. And with the matte shadows, you are going to get quite a bit of kick up. So you can see just with dabbing it into the pan a few times, it is going to be something that gives you more fallout. Then I'm going to move into this peachy shade Morgan, just kind of build that up in my crease a little bit. I think I want to go for some of like the purpley tones. I'm just going to start by mixing these together. I like that you get a good mix of like orange, peach, especially peach, because to me peach is very neutral compared to like some of these like mustard orange shades. And then berry tones and champagnes, bronzy shades. You do get a good variety of colors. I'm already making this like pretty dramatic just for the two transition shades. They blend together really nicely. I want to use the shade Glory. And some of the deeper shades are a little bit harder to build up. I'm going to use this little angled brush from Luxie with the shade Glory. I'm just going to take Glory. Anytime a shade's like a little deeper, I like to use more of like a packing brush. I think that works nicely because a fluffy brush would make it look a little bit patchy. The mattes in here kind of remind me of Anastasia matte shadows, where you're gonna get a lot of pigmentation, but if you apply them too like casually, like almost like sloppy or not, basically if I were to apply this with like a big fluffy brush and just move it around, it can get kind of muddy pretty quickly. So I originally wanted to use the shade Poppy because this is like such a beautiful pigmented color. Maybe I should do that. But I love this shade Aster, but it's not as dramatic as Poppy. Ooh, do I want to wear both? Let me do Poppy. Let me just go ahead and apply it now that it's on my hand. And then we'll layer in Aster a little bit, maybe in the center. But before I keep on building up Poppy, the lid color, I do want to deepen up my outer crease a little bit more. I'm going to take the shade Clove. It's kind of like an eggplant purpley shade. This is also a little packing brush from Luxie. Just want to like smudge that into the outer corner. I'm like holding my breath because this shade's a little bit harder to pack on. I have found that if you like brush it in the wrong way, it ends up looking a little bit patchy. So I don't want to move it around too much on my eye. Just want to get like the right amount in the right place and stop messing with it. So I'm going to use a little bit of my Cover FX setting spray on a Morphe M124. This is my favorite eyeshadow brush ever. I have like 7 of these. I always use this for my lid. So I'm just gonna go in with this shade Poppy, build that up a bit more. There we go. It's a very metallic shade, so I wanted to wet my brush to really make it pop. And we do get a bit more fallout with some of the darker shades, but it's not an issue for me because it's not like fallout that like ruined your makeup or anything. I think I got the lid color to where I want it to be. I'm gonna take another one of my Morphe M124, wet the brush as well. And Aster is more like, it's a pretty flaky shade, which I'm upset about just because this is like the prettiest shade to me in the palette. But I do want to see if with a wet brush I can get it to really stay on. There we go. Just kind of like transition into the cranberry. So I kind of like the way that looks, but I feel like it's gonna be more effective if I just cover up where I put the purple and do it in the center of my lid. I feel like that's gonna pop even more. So I'm just going back in with Poppy, and I think I just wanna I was debating doing Aster as a as a like halo eye. And I think I'm gonna like that even more. So let me just pack this on. To really get like the look of this color, I feel like I'm gonna need some glitter glue. All right, so I just grabbed some Too Faced glitter glue. I just wanna use a tiny bit. Put that on the center of my lid. I usually like to apply this before I put the shadow on. So hopefully I can kind of cover things up so it doesn't look patchy in the center of my eye. Let's put this to the test. I'm just gonna dip my finger right, there we go. Right in the shadow with the glitter glue, boom, there we go. All right, so the duochromes are definitely way better with the glitter glue. I kind of like gave up on them, but I'm glad I tried this out because just like trying to pack it on with a wet brush, and it still wasn't giving me the intensity that I wanted. So I am gonna throw on some lashes, and then we'll finish up with a lower lash line, and then probably something for my inner corner as well. All right, so I just threw on some lashes. I'm wearing Cocoa Lashes and Misha. That's what I'm wearing almost every single time I'm wearing lashes. And then the lip color I'm wearing is Unbutton from Fenty, and I tapped it off with Samantha from Buxom. This is like my favorite, like really light nude gloss. So I'm really digging this eye look now that I have my lip color on, lashes on, and all like comes together. I really like this color. And I don't wear my eyeshadow like this, especially during the summer. I do looks like this for fall, but I wanted to play with like some of the deeper tones. Let's see, for lower lash line, I'm gonna start off with Morgan, this peachy shade. Just gonna take, let me do this. I'm just gonna take a little pencil brush. I don't want to do anything too crazy. Oh, and I did also add in my waterline purple matte liner. I like the ones from Smashbox and Urban Decay. And Benefit just released some new liners that I'm testing out as well. Then I'm gonna mostly add in the shade Poppy. I kind of like a little bit of shimmer on my lower lash line. I feel like matte, darker lower lash line can look a little bit hard. So I just threw on some mascara on my lower lash line, and then I just want to do a little pop. Let's do this like champagne shade in my inner corner. I did wet my pencil brush because I do want it to be really pop out. I really wanted to put a lot in my inner corner because I love the effect of like all the different shimmer shades on my lid, but I actually really like this eye look, and I didn't know if I would when I was blending out that matte shade in my outer corner because that matte shade does not like me. It is a little bit harder to blend out, but it all definitely came together. All right, so the eye look is complete. I used about half the palette, and I used a lot of like the darker, more like tricky shades to work with because definitely the lighter shades are like kind of foolproof compared to like the deeper burgundy tones and some of the duochromes as well. But that's everything for this makeup look. I'm gonna zoom you guys out and I'll give you guys all my final thoughts about the palette. All right guys, so overall thoughts about the palette. I really do like the Sunrise palette. I like the colors in here. I like the layout of the palette. This is definitely not like an everyday palette. So just keep that in mind. Even if these are like your everyday shades, it's not something that you're gonna do like if you have 2 minutes to like get your makeup on before you head to work kind of thing. This is gonna be something that takes a little bit more attention to detail, kind of similar to some Anastasia palettes. But the difference between this and some of my Anastasia palettes is that in my Anastasia palette, I feel like I need to pull one out. Let me give you guys a comparison. All right, so if we take a look at the Norvina palette, which has like some similar kind of purpley shades, it's a little bit of a stretch, but there's at least some purple in here. Let me compare a shade like Rose Gold, where you don't need to make this work by building it up, using some glitter glue, anything like that. This is just a stunning, super dramatic foiled shade on its own. And then if you want to take one of the more interesting colors in this palette, like the shade that I have on my lid right now, it's gonna be a little bit trickier to get this to look as metallic as this without really using a lot of glitter glue and packing. Or even if you take something that's not, let's do Laurel, which is just a regular metallic shade where you don't need a glitter glue. Like this shade is definitely not as foiled and dramatic as a foiled shade from an Anastasia palette. And I love the Anastasia formula so much. Let me show you guys maybe a different shade. So Dreamer is more comparable to Laurel, the shade from Natasha Denona. Let's put that on top. Yeah, so you can see that from Anastasia is so much more dramatic, just swatching it in comparison to one of the metallic shades from the Natasha Denona palette. Let me know if you guys can see difference, because I can definitely up close see a difference, and in my viewfinder I can see difference for sure. Like, especially if I turn my hand like this, you can see how this just like really reflects, and this is like less, I feel like this gives you more of like a 3D effect, and this is more like flat effect. So for something that's gonna be more of dramatic shades, I really want them to look dramatic. So when I have a palette like the Sunrise palette that has some more metallic and dramatic shades, I really want them to stand out and look really dramatic. And I feel like I have other formulas in my collection that really give me that effect, even at a cheaper price point. So I don't think that there's anything like super wrong with the metallic shades, but it's not the most dramatic metallics that I have in my collection. I have better metallics. Anastasia metallics for sure are a lot better to me for a lot cheaper. So overall, happy with the matte formula, except for the shade. I don't know why. It's just a little bit too patchy for me every time that I go to use it. Like every time I've used it with like the dramatic shades, like today, the shades in the center, the lighter shades, it always ends up looking a little bit patchy or a little bit muddy. So that shade drives me crazy, but overall, the rest of the shadows I haven't really had an issue with. They do give you a little bit more fallout. They are pretty pigmented, so you do want to use a little bit at a time with the matte shades. The metallics overall are really nice, but like I said, you can get some more foiled shadows out there. And then the duochromes, if you use them correctly, like I found out today, you're gonna get a very dramatic look. Otherwise, you're gonna get a softer look. Like I've played with the shade Awakening. Really, really gorgeous eyeshadow, but I do want to play with it with glitter glue, because I feel like that's really, really gonna pop, but you can definitely still use them with a wet brush if you want to do a more softer or toned down look. Overall, I am happy with the formula, the shades in the palette, but I do think that if you want more dramatic metallic shadows, go for Anastasia. There's other things out there for cheaper compared to this $65 palette. I do think that it's still worth $65. Like if I got this in a bigger palette for $129, I maybe wouldn't think it's worth it. I actually wouldn't think it's worth it. But for $65, I think it's on par with other palettes that are $65 for sure. I also wanted to mention another palette that this color scheme is very similar to, in case you guys are curious of like what it's similar to in my collection. This is Huda Beauty Desert Dust. I don't like this palette at all. I only keep it for moments like this where I want to put it in a video to compare it to another palette. So that's the only reason I keep this palette around. But this has like very, very similar shades. It has like those duochromes. Like this shade is very similar to what I have on my lid today. But I find that the Sunrise palette is definitely way better than this. I find that the shades in here, like the mattes, are kind of patchy. The metallics are not as metallic even as the ones in the Sunrise palette. So if you like a color scheme like this, but you don't like this formula for whatever reason, I actually feel like a lot of people love this palette, but I wasn't for it. These are definitely pretty similar color schemes to each other, but I definitely picked this one over this one for sure. So that is kind of like a similar comparison in a similar price point, in case you guys are curious. All right, so overall I am really happy with the palette, the layout, the formula. The biggest letdowns would just be if you don't like to take extra steps with your eyeshadows, you want something that's like more fuss-free, you do need to take those extra steps to make those duochromes pop. And then the metallics are not as like foiled as some other shadows around a similar price point. But other than that, overall, really great quality. I will say that this palette isn't as like beginner friendly as some other palettes, but I would say the same thing about like my Norvina palette or other Anastasia palettes, because those matte shadows are going to be more pigmented, and the different textures are going to be a little bit more unique to work with compared to something like an Urban Decay palette or a Too Faced palette. So those are definitely things to keep in mind. But if you've been interested in this palette, you like the color scheme, you like the brand, I think you would really enjoy this palette overall. But that is going to be everything for this video. Let me know if you guys ended up picking up this palette, or your thoughts about Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes in general, if you think the brand is worth it or if it's like overhyped. I'd love to know in the comments below. And if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll talk to you soon in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.